I'm going to introduce Dan, who has been in our area for over 20 years. He owns Flip Flop Tours. His family is involved in the CAM school as volunteers, as well as many other things in the community. Dan is very well known, and probably some of you have taken tours with him. And I'm pleased and proud to introduce Dan Pattman.
All right. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. How are you all doing? All good? I know more than a few faces here. Hopefully I'll know a few more by the end of the evening. What am I here to talk about? Well, a little bit about myself at the beginning, just as a bit of an entry, and just to know who I am and what I do. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what it's like to be a foreigner living in this area, in this community, my views, thoughts, ideas, in terms of acceptance, in terms of integration, and in terms of, as a foreigner living here for over 20 years in this community, and a few things and points that I might have that might be of use to you in the future, things you may not know, things you may know, so how Dan, why are you telling me all of that stuff? But hopefully you'll come away with a little bit of information from this, and hopefully I won't bore you all to death. I've been speaking to Steve Cotton a little bit, so he's given me a few pointers. So maybe that's not a good thing. Okay, so as you know, I'm Dan Pattman. I've lived here in, well, the Costa Alegre, because I haven't lived in the same place all the time I've been here. But I'm originally, as you may or may not guess from the accent, I am from England. Not Australia, not South Africa, not New Zealand. If I had a peso for every time I've heard that, I'd be retired and I would not be here doing this right now. No, but it's a common mistake, don't know why, but hey, it is. So, I'm originally from England, from the south, 45 minutes southwest of London, but that was a long time ago. I'm almost more time here than I am there now, so I'm almost more Mexican than I am English at this point. So, where's my background? Well, originally, at some point, I was a marine biologist. That was my training. I went to South Africa. I worked with the Great White Shark Research Program. And actually, that is in part what led me to Mexico. So, I was comfortably and conveniently working at home with a job that I picked up, and my mum said, you know, you got to do something. You know, it's that gentle, get out, go. So I started looking, I thought, well, where could be cool? Well, Mexico. I've never been there. Sea turtle conservation. Could be interesting. So off I go, here I come. And I spent 5 months living on the beach in a tent, looking after sea turtles, which I'm sure some of you have known with the work that goes on at Playa del Coco and here in the bay. It's a work and a task and a job that is actually very important. And mostly it's run by locals, actually. Slight detour. I was talking with someone about this just the other day. The word local. Someone said that in certain areas it has negative connotations. The word local coming from imperial roots, from the domination, the monarchies, the European conquest, and things like that. However, whilst some people may see that, and I don't want to get into the whole conversation about woke culture and all of that, locally speaking, in this area, in that sense, the people of this area call themselves locals. So, first point, first tip, don't worry about imperialism and monarchies and all of that stuff. The local people here call themselves locals. Soy de aquí, soy local, soy gente local. Okay? So it's not something you have to worry about. First tip about integration there. Anyway, so I came here, I was working in sea turtle conservation. Whilst I was here, I decided I really like this country with these people, these locals who I was living near, who were so friendly and so welcoming to me. So I was like, well, what can I do to stay here? So I somehow fell into the tour business, which has got nothing to do with marine biology. And here I am, 15, 20 years later, still going at tours, but I'm also now, I like to think, a local. So that's a bit about what I'm going to talk to you about. So the first big and major obstacle for myself as a foreigner coming to here to live in another community, it's an easy one, the language. I was very lucky. I went to a school in England where we were taught Spanish. It wasn't French and German like most places. I was taught French and Spanish. Much to my grandmother's annoyance that we didn't learn German, but hey. But still, school Spanish, school languages, generally speaking, are not enough to live in a country. But when I came here, like I said, the people that I was meeting, the locals that were in the area I were so welcoming and so open. Just by me making an absolutely horrific effort and butchering their language, I was still welcomed. People would say, hey, sit down, have a beer. I couldn't tell half of the words they were saying at this point, but hey, despite having done an exchange to the north of Spain where I lived with a host family for 5 weeks. Then you go 10 years without speaking Spanish and you forget it all. But just by giving a little bit of an effort at the beginning, doors would open, cold beers would appear, a bag of chips, a bag of peanuts, something like that. People would sit down and start talking to me. And we'd muddle through, and best as we can, we try and find some common ground. I ended up talking with a guy for about 2 hours about crossbreeding chilies once. I don't know how that came up when we were just buying a block of ice and a couple of beers before we headed back to the turtle camp. But hey, this guy wanted to sit and talk and get to know a little bit about me. Okay? So, I'm here, I'm working, I've started to get involved, my language is starting to improve a little bit. It's still nowhere near the level it is now. But one of the most important things, nobody ever mocked me, nobody ever criticized me. I was allowed to go and try and do my best to make the worst, best possible effort I could at speaking Spanish. During this time, I actually, and as was mentioned a little bit earlier, the CAM school, Centro de Atención Múltiple over in Barra, the special needs school, I went out there to help translate, which, considering my Spanish level at the time, was kind of a bit of a joke, but it was better than the guys I was helping translate. They're no longer with us, unfortunately, but we were going over there, and much to the teachers, they weren't being nasty, but they were trying not to laugh in the guy's face, because he was trying to talk to them about changing the aves. Everyone know the aves? The birds. He's talking about keys, llaves. And he was trying to get them to talk about aves. So here I come, and I'm helping to put things on a straight line and get things working. And doing this is where I met my wife. Okay, so my wife, who's not here, she's actually working. She's a teacher at CAM. She is working this afternoon. But that's where we met. After a couple of years, well, we got married and we have a family. My kids are over the back there. But that was a whole journey in acceptance, perceptions, and misunderstandings, let's call some of them, during the way. Okay? So, my wife's family were from, or they are from, sorry, I should say, they're from La Huerta, just up the road here. My mother-in-law, my father-in-law both passed away, but they were very traditionalists. So very, prim and proper is not the right phrase, but they were very correct. Things were done the old way. They were always incredibly polite. They always used the usted form when they were talking to me. They never had any out-and-out animosity towards me. They were always very welcoming to my face. I'm sure behind my back there were a few things of like, oh, what are you doing with this gringo, or something like that. I don't know. I've never heard and never been told, and I'll probably never hear those. But anyway, they were always very, very polite to me and accepting, to a degree, because they live a very traditional life. My sister-in-law, who has, for any of you know my shop, my office, next door, the clothes boutique, is my sister-in-law. She lived in Tijuana for those who pronounce it that way, and various other parts, Mexico City. So she was exposed to a world that was much bigger than just La Huerta and Las Pilas, which is a small village of about, I don't know, a couple of hundred people. So there was always a straightaway acceptance by my sister-in-law. It would be like, hey Dan, come on in, come and have dinner with us. I'm like, oh, I've eaten dinner, don't come in and have dinner. That's a very Mexican thing. Bringing back a random memory. My future mother-in-law, we were sitting down at their ranch. They were cattle farmers. And so, Dan, come and sit with the men and eat. That's the way things were done. Okay, all right. Good. After protesting a little bit, so then they say sit down, and they've done tostadas, the big tostadas with shredded pork and lettuce and everything on. So they put 2 of these huge things in front of me, and I eat them. Dan, would you like some more? No, I'm good, thank you. No, some more. No, I'm good. Next thing I know, there's a plate filled up again, right in front of me. Now, I know there are different cultures in different areas where it's polite to leave something, polite to finish it. I didn't have a clue where I stood at this point, so I finished it. Plate goes away, plate comes back again. We're up to 6 now. Don't want to be rude. No, I said, no, I've got it. I left half. And my wife says, yeah, my mum's probably thinking, geez, what is this guy that this woman's marrying? He's going to eat us out of house and home. But no, they accepted me. But going back to the very correct and old style form, my in-laws, my future in-laws, for example, I had an issue with my truck at the time. Needed to go and get a new piece. And it wasn't like now where we've got lots of auto shops around town. So we had to go to Outland. So all I could care about was getting my car fixed. But my mother-in-law was like, well, no, this is very improper. So she sent our then 9-year-old nephew with us as a chaperone. Because it's not seen to be going out with a couple of young guys, young lady, to just be on their own and be loose around town. It's not the done thing, it's not correct. This is a very much what they call the rancherias, the small ranch towns, the more rural areas. So, different ways of thinking from the towns. When we were proposing to get married, and actually, you know what? I've never been called a gringo. Occasionally I've heard the word gabacho, which is a rude version of it, but no one has or that I can remember anyway, has called me gringo to my face. I'm very lucky that I've always been called güero, so like pale-skinned. Kind of obvious, right? Funnily enough, my father-in-law was called El Güero Salvatierra. Nobody knew him by his full name, Desiderio, but he was El Güero Salvatierra. But I even got asked once, are you his son? I was like, no, that's his daughter. But that's the whole thing. So, I've never been out and out called a gringo, but when we were planning to get married, my wife and I wanted to do things correctly. Because even though Catholicism is losing its foothold here in the country and there are more religions, they're more tolerated, it's still a thing, and my in-laws were Catholics. I was thinking in Spanish then. And so I had to go and do catechism classes. I'd been baptized in C of E, Church of England, Anglicism. Good old Henry VIII. But when we first went and talked to the priest in Cihuatlán, who's since retired, Padre Tino, he was like, no, not going to happen. He just straight away saw me and he was like, no. So I was facing this discrimination of, you're not from here, you're just a foreigner, not going to happen. And we're like, why? Well, no, you need more time. It's going to take too long. You can't prepare, you can't do this in time. Okay, that's a bit of a stumbling block. All right. So, off we go. My wife at the time was a physiotherapist. She's since had carpal tunnel issues and can't do that. But she was giving physiotherapy to a very rich and well-to-do lady in Cihuatlán, who, if any of you have walked up to the cross on the hill, she was the one who paid for the stairs that go all the way up the hill there. And she turned around and said, well, this isn't on. We're not having that. This is Dan. This is your future husband. We're not going to let... This is a very correct lady who would never use a swear word in her life. A couple of curse words came out that day. And she was a very religious lady, and yet those curse words were directed at the town priest. I'm sorry, Father. And so it was like, okay, we'll make this happen. Don't worry, leave it with me. So a month later, I'm sitting one-on-one with a 70-something-year-old lady called Conchita. She's about this tall. And we're doing one-on-one catechism classes. Fast forward 2-3 months, I've gone through all the process and the steps. I am given my confirmation by the bishop of Outland, along with about 400 other kids and about 3 or 4 other adults, who are realizing they need this if they want to do the church marriage. And then I go for my... my confirmation of my first communion. Sorry, I got this wrong around. So I go, and of course, rather than just the standard way it's done here, where you just sit in the pews, and the mass goes on as normal. No, a chair is put up front on the raised stall just before the dais. And all of a sudden, this priest who 3 months ago didn't want anything to do with me, it's like, this is Dan, he's come from England from a long way away to be part of our flock, and we're so glad he's here. His perception had changed because someone had a word in his ear. Someone who gave a lot of money to the church. But his perceptions changed. And actually, talking to him afterwards, he retired and he was here in Melaque for a little while. And we'd actually play bingo on the square, the Mexican lottery. And he was a very nice guy. And it was, he never really gave me a reason why, but hey, it happened that I was accepted. So that was probably the second biggest step after my family, my in-laws, of being accepted here. Okay? The big step with my in-laws of being accepted was, before we were even married, my wife had a major medical issue, and she rushed to the hospital, and I didn't know anything about this at the time because I was off working, and some colleagues of hers came in and said to me, Dan, do you know about Lindsay? I was like, no, what's going on? Oh, and they told me, so I haul off in my car and get over to Manzanillo, and her parents and her brothers arrive, and they're like, it's all okay, Dan, you can go now, we're here, we're all good. I was like, no, I'm good, I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay here until at least she's out of surgery, and I know everything's good, and then I'll be fine. And they were like, several times, mainly the brothers, big protective brothers. Big brothers. 6'6", they're even taller than my son. We're like, no, you can go. No, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm not going anywhere. She came out, I went in, checked she was okay, said goodbye, and off I go. That was a big turning point, because I didn't just bolt and run. That was, according to my wife as well, when I shot up in their estimation, and it was accepted because I wasn't just that gringo who was here for a short time and disappearing off. So, I'm living here in Mexico now. I've been here for, that was 2007, for about 4 or 5 years now. So, the first place I lived was here in Melaque. So, do any of you know Don Lubin? No? You probably know his store, Asturiana. Little liquor store around the corner from the square on the Oxide. Okay? So Don Lubin is actually originally from the town where my wife is from, or nearby. And he owns some bungalows near the pool hall. And that was the first place I stayed and lived, and we lived there for a year or so after we got married. And he was very much your typical older generation Mexican. Very respectful, very educated, always, and still to this day, he always smiles and says, "Hola Danny, ¿cómo estás?" as I go by in the car, going to pick my daughter up from school. But he was very respectful, very polite, never once had an issue that I was a foreigner here. When I was at this time, I was 23, 25, in that sort of age bracket, so I was still very young. The people I was mixing with in town weren't older people, they weren't older generations. So I didn't have the exposure to the business people and that kind of generation of Mexican who would accept me more and have more value in the community from a point of view that more people would accept you. But the youngsters were fine, as long as you go out drinking beer, that's it, everyone accepts you. But like I say, Don Levine, who owned the apartment I rented in, was older generation, he was old school, he was very polite, always very nice to my face. Like I say, still is to this day. But at the end of the day, I'm still living here in Melaque, a mixed community, foreign and national. Excuse me. At that time, it wasn't as year-round permanent as it is now. Obviously, with the immigration changes, things have changed. But still, it was one of those times when there were more foreigners at certain times of the year. And so I was always marked out as being that foreigner here. After about 6 years or so, we moved out to Aguacate. That's 100% Mexican community out there. I know there's a few foreigners who live out there now, but yeah, we lived out there, and there was no one out there. I never got full acceptance out there either, but there was never any animosity. A little anecdote there. The first week we were there, someone stole the hose off the front of our garden that was on the tap. After that, I could leave anything I want out on the driveway. Nothing would get touched. But it was almost like I hadn't proven myself. It was like, oh, it's that gringo guy and the girl from La Huerta. It's what it was. But with the people who lived there who we did know, so teachers from CAM, from the special needs school, other people we knew, one of the ladies who in the shop, which at the age of 30 or thereabouts, calling me Don, which is a term of respect, like sir, was kind of a shock and a step back. It was like, okay, maybe, yeah, I'm starting to get a little bit more accepted here. I think when Hurricane Patricia hit in 2011, I think it was, that was when I made a big step in the community over there in Melaque. You know, everything got shredded, everything got ripped down and destroyed. Those houses are like bunkers, nothing's going to destroy them. But the trees, the water line, the electric lines, everything like that, that was all totaled. At that point, I had a little gas-powered water pump, so everyone would pump up their water from their well to their tank, and we'd pass my pump up and down the street. We'd be out there macheteing down all the branches and clearing them up, you know, just getting stuck in. And it's something that after every natural disaster, all the people around here do. Everyone gets stuck in and helps out. It's one of the great things about here in Mexico. But that one was out there, one of those things that, whilst we were living there, happened. And, you know, I think in the eyes of the people there, there was more acceptance. There were still tests. I would still get, not direct tests, not like, although there were a couple, but tests of things like about language. They'd throw obscure terms at me that I wouldn't have a clue. I read a very funny one that's quite rude on one of the groups this morning, somewhere else in the country, about Mexico is very, very heavy on double entendre, although here we call them albur, and I still couldn't tell you half of them, even after 20-something years. They just go straight over my head and I take them as the literal meaning, and then people laugh at me because I don't get it. But it is what it is. Back when I was at the turtle camps, we'd have competitions of how much chili can Dan eat. Like, they think because I was a foreigner, I can't eat chili. I was like, we've had Indians in our country for several hundred years. They brought all their chilies and spices and curries. It's not a problem. But these were the fun tests, you know. Give Dan weird food, see if he can eat it, see if he won't just throw up. I ate armadillo in spicy green sauce. It's very tasty. Like little pork riblets, very tasty, you know. So there's all these little random tests, but they were done in a friendly way. It was never, ever have I felt something that was done with animosity. Nothing with mean or malintent. When I moved out to where I live now, Jalisco, very local. You know, it's farmers, it's people who work in the communities. At this time of the year, it's about 15 or 20 people in the peloton riding on the bike cycling routes around there. Like, hey Dan, how you doing? As they come past my front gate in the morning. But it's still a very local community. And we know most of our neighbours, but there's a few we don't, obviously. But even though we know them, we're not all in each other's lives. It's just the way that kind of community where we are is. However, was it 2 years ago now? We had a major fire in the field in front of us. The guy who owns the field wanted to clear it, set fire. Well, when it was bone dry, 5 hectares goes up very, very quickly. We weren't there. I can't remember where I was. I think I might have been on a tour or something. But anyway, none of us were home. All our neighbours came round. They called my sister-in-law, they got a key, they went into our bodega, they got the pump and the hose pipes out, and they watered down everything without us being there, without saying anything, to protect our palapa, to protect the front of our house. It was just something they did without asking. So, I think, touch wood maybe, that we might have been a bit of acceptance there. And people are now starting to see and think of us. My wife, curiously, who is Mexican from birth, is known as La Teacher. Because she's a teacher, yes, but they figure because she's married to a foreigner, she's an English teacher. I don't know. Perceptions. People make what they think, and that's where they go. There's always a curiosity when people see me about, do I speak English, do I speak Spanish, how am I? And a lot of this goes back to the language, obviously. And that's the number one thing between locals and their perceptions of you. This morning, in fact, it happened. I went to see Dr. David, and he was like, English or Spanish? I can do both, whichever one. He was like, oh, okay. So there's this natural curiosity of, am I going to be able to communicate with this person? Which we'll get onto a couple of tips I've got in a little while. But it's always a curiosity thing. Like I mentioned, in the more rural areas, everyone is to a fault polite with how they speak to you in respect and terms. Not so much at times here in the towns. And I've had a mix of attitudes and reactions. You know, people who obviously won't name, but they're supposedly educated, well-to-do people in the area, and they've turned around to me and said, "Well, you can tell you're a foreigner because your language isn't perfect." Look, my face doesn't, you know. But anyway, it's just certain people, and you find this in any culture, any community, anywhere in the world, people who like to criticize something. And it was just one of those things. It was like, they're just nitpicking for no reason at all, other than he wanted to have something to say. I brushed it off. I just think, yeah, whatever, who cares? You know, one person is not going to taint my view of here. Also, I remembered more of this than I thought. Wow, I really did get further on. Okay. So yeah, there was a lot of curiosity to me and everything. Like I said, a lot of people now around town, the older generations, the more business type people, I've been here long enough now that people know me. They probably know more about me than I do at this point. But I'm having that mix, and there's a lot, we are still a small town, obviously, but you get that, hey, hola, buenos días, buenas tardes. Hey Dan, how you doing? Hola Daniel, bless you. And so I feel more part of the town now. There's always, and this is something that certainly where I live in England, there's not so much of that saying good morning, good afternoon to everyone where you go, but without a fault. Even if you're walking past someone you don't know in the street here, they always say, buenos días, buenas tardes, con permiso, if you're passing between them. There's always that welcoming, that how would you say, that need to be polite, to be welcoming to their village, their town, whether you're local, whether you're foreigner. I've always found that I've never, or very, very rarely found the meanness or the nastiness that in a lot of places there is. That's not to say there aren't bad things, okay? So, a lot of the perception instantly, and like I mentioned, I have never, or that I can remember anyway, had anyone level the word gringo or gabacho at me. And if it has, I'm sure it's never been used in a nasty way that it can be. But there is this image of wealth. It's a perceived image that as a foreigner, you have money. Whether it's true or not, whether you're a millionaire, whether you're on a fixed pension or working day to day to make a living, as a foreigner, I've found that you are generally painted with the brush of you have money. My wife gave me this example. Juan Perez, who lives in the US all his life, born in the US, but born of Mexican parents. If he was to come back here to Mexico, he would have more rights than I do as a now 14-year Mexican citizen who's paid taxes for 20 years. Just by birthright, he automatically has more rights than I do. I'm a naturalized Mexican, as I mentioned. I've voted in 3 national elections and 4 local ones now. 4. And in my eyes, I always say I'm naturalized Mexican. I'm a citizen, yes. But I've had people say to me, no, you're Mexican. You have papers, you have a passport, you have a voting card, you're Mexican. Doesn't matter where you're from, you have done the whole thing. A childhood friend of my wife who lives up in Tijuana, her husband is a lawyer who crosses backwards and forwards between the US every day. When I first met him, he hated me, didn't like me at all. He was like, without saying it directly like this, he was just, you're a gringo here making money and taking it and just, you're not good for the country. And which my brain is ticking away thinking, you're doing exactly the same going up to the US every day as a lawyer and coming back. But hey, you know, he started quizzing me. So when you did your naturalization exam, did you know the national anthem? Well, they didn't ask me that, but yes, I do know. And I do know that it's a call to defense and let's survive the patria of the country and blah, blah, blah. Oh, but what about this? And he'd start testing me on history, which is the wrong subject considering my job is tourism and taking tours to all the historic parts of the country. But hey, you know, but it took 4 or 5 visits for him to just think, all right, okay, now he's a good friend. They come back every now and again to visit their family. We have a beer, we have whatever, and it's all good. But that benefits of living in another country and then coming here, the wealth, those are two of the big bad things. Jobs. Finding a job. For me to find a job locally, without starting my own business, incredibly hard. Let's think, I've probably only had, apart from tourism, I've probably only had one job. That was given to me by a friend. It was a scuba diving job in Manzanillo, a commercial diving thing. But I'm perceived as a foreigner who doesn't need a job. Back to the wealth. During the pandemic, during COVID, no one would give me a job. I was willing, because there's no tourism, obviously, I was willing to go back to the port to work in physical labor, whatever. No, not going to happen. You don't need a job, you're a gringo. Never said those words, obviously. But so, I ended up going back to the UK and sending money back here for the family. But there was that perceived image, you don't need a job. I could not find a job if I wanted to. I did some online stuff, but it was never finding an actual job. About the closest I would have got, and obviously they weren't hiring at the time, would have been an English-speaking guide or concierge in a hotel. Obviously there's no tourism, it's not going to happen, right? Another bad thing, we've probably all heard this word, gentrification. It's a hot topic right now, especially in the areas of Chapala, Ajijic, San Miguel de Allende, because they're the big foreign communities in the country. I'm not sure of how that's going up in Baja California, Cabo San Lucas, but you hear it a lot here. Oh, sorry, I should say up in Guadalajara, San Miguel. Just starting to see whisperings of it down here. I've seen more than a couple of comments on various groups. There was one that got blown up the other day on Amigos or wherever. But if you look carefully, it's a little bit more of that. It's not the locals doing this. If you look carefully, look at the profiles, look at the people who are doing this. They're people from Guadalajara who they're either young people who are just keyboard warriors, or, and I don't know, they could be people who are directly dealing with the issues that you find in Chapala, Ajijic, and San Miguel. I personally have been on the receiving end as a foreigner by a foreigner in a foreign country. If you can get that one. I was walking into Ajijic with a group. We were just literally doing a rest stop on a way home from a long journey, and I was walking everyone down to the main square as a meeting point to show and locate everyone. As we're walking in, a group of about 4 or 5 foreigners, can't tell you which country they're from, but they said, "Ah, you're here visiting? Yeah, you're not staying?" "No." "Good, because we don't want any more people here." "Excuse me, and you are who? This is your country?" It was shocking, to say the least. Unfortunately, those attitudes are the ones that drive a wedge between acceptance into a local community and alienation, or out and out. I'm sure you've seen the news over in Spain this year. You know, in Barcelona, the Catalans are a fiery bunch anyway, but you know, that tourists out. We've seen a little bit of in Oaxaca. I was in Oaxaca a couple of weeks ago. No. There's just the odd people, rabble-rousers people, but attitudes don't help with acceptance. Shops, this one's an interesting one. So, big shops like AutoZone out here on the highway. I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, we don't want that, the locals don't want that, nobody wants this kind of big store." Yeah, they do actually. Most people, not all of them. Not everyone can be pleased by everything, yet. Firstly, it's a local putting it in, or a Mexican, I should say. That's not completely true. But I've been told by several mechanics, "Oh, go and get a free diagnosis in AutoZone, get the parts and come back and I'll fit them for you." You know, they can multiply their work without having to do it. And my wife pointed out a very interesting point that I hadn't thought of. A lot of locals will agree with your point of view to not be contrary and not be combative. They want to be, I don't want to say the word they want to be liked, but they don't want to be conflictive. That is it's quite rare that you will find combative and conflicted people, in my experience. All of this is in my experience. I may be completely wrong, but people will often give you a point of view that agrees with yours because they want to be, well, everyone wants acceptance to some degree, right? But they don't want to be contrary, they don't want to be combative. I'm not allowed to talk about that next section. Steve Cotton made that mistake. Okay, so in fact it is a big part of everything here. Bad guys. They're here, we know they're here, we don't know where they are, we don't know what they do. We're not involved in their stuff, they're not involved in our stuff. It's peace. That's all I'll say on that one. A couple of little anecdotes here before I get on to my final bit. When I was meeting my mother-in-law and my Spanish was bad, I had to, without realizing it at the time, my future mother-in-law, trying to keep a straight face, as I was talking about something or other, and I started talking about calzones. Anyone know calzones? Underwear. I thought I was talking about calcetines, my socks. Trying to keep a 70-something-year-old, very prim and proper Mexican lady from cracking up in my face. That's the level of politeness that my mother-in-law had. And the other one as well, again, back to impressions and people's thoughts. I got pulled over, this is years ago, by the federales when they still existed. There weren't many foreigners driving locally plated cars. First thing he says when he gets out was, license, visa. Here's the license, and then here's my Mexican voting card. Oh, you're Mexican? Yeah? Sorry, sir, have a good day. The perception. The federales were known for being a whole nother level of the corruption and everything. But anyway. Okay, so a little bit of a summary here, because I think I've gone on a bit. I knew it, either I'd be talking for 5 minutes or talking forever. So summary, to make yourselves a little bit more integrated, a little bit more ingratiated, a little bit more popular. People accept you more. Try and speak a little bit of Spanish. It could be the worst accent. It might be the wrong word, but you made an effort. Heck, technology now, we can use Google Translate, we can use all of those things, and it really does help us. But just by making a few words an effort, even if it's just buenos dias, buenas tardes, instantly is going to help and open doors. Meet and greet your neighbors, your local neighbors. Even if you're not going to become part of their lives, just by saying hello and saying, hey, I'm John, I'm Fred, I'm Jean, whoever. We're next door here, we're going to be here for 4 months, 6 months, forever. You know, they'll welcome that and they'll be happy with that. I've mentioned, oh yeah, another one, be nice. That's a given. This one is a kind of a warning. People will always try and help you, which is a good thing. But not everyone is doing it correctly. They're not doing it out of maliciousness. Okay, where I'm going with this one is directions. Always be careful with directions. Ask for 3 and triangulate. It's about the best you can do. Right, my office, 38D. The number in front, 417. Number 44 is down at the square in Melaque. Go figure. And the best directions I was ever given. Okay, so you go down the street with the, it wasn't an Oxo back then, the Abarrotes on the corner. And you know where that red rusty pickup truck was that they towed away 3 years ago? Turn left there, and it... I swear. Don't lock yourselves into your houses. Go out, meet people, meet the locals, be friendly. Eat street food. Go where the locals eat. There's lots of places. There's some amazing food. Not to say that the restaurants that are seasonal, run by foreigners, aren't good as well. They are. They're very good. We are incredibly lucky in this area. I noticed the difference. I went back to England last summer for my granddad's 90th. The quality of servers and everything has got nothing on Melaque and Barra. We have a great area here. And my biggest tip, to be integrated, to be accepted and seen as a local, is when it's January and you come out of your house at 7 in the morning, you're not dressed as you are now. It's cold out there. You have got to be wrapped up like this going to school or going to the shop. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope I did you a minute.
Dan can continue to take questions from you. Our pastor of this church, Al, has got a microphone. If you put your hand up, he'll bring you the microphone and you'll be able to ask Dan any questions you may have. As you can see, he's quite an interesting character, and he'll be more than happy to give you his... Yes.
Depends on the topic.
Anybody want to put their hand up? Questions? 1, 2, 3. Way over here, Al, please.
Hello,
Hi
thank
there.
you very much.
My pleasure.
I heard that you're quite the tour guide, and my friend has been here forever, finally drug us down here. More than glad that he did, loving it. We would like to do some scuba diving,
Okay.
and from what I gather, you might know where, also some local good snorkeling.
Okay, good snorkeling locally. Tenecatita is the best one, or over in El Acuario in Cuesta Comates, which is the left-hand side of the bay. Scuba diving, I'm not sure right now. I think Pacific Adventures near the center do some scuba, and if not, it's over to Manzanillo as far as I know at the moment.
And these places for snorkeling, what's the best way to get there?
Tenecatita, there's a bus on Tuesdays. Yeah, Tuesdays and Thursdays there's buses to Tenecatita with Anna, I think it is? Juliana, sorry, there we go, yeah. Which is Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, okay.
Across from Super Hawaii, or Super Franco.
Across from Super Franco, there you go. See, people know more about the tours than I do.
And in Manzanillo,
Mhm.
any dive shops you would recommend?
Yeah, it's called Octopus's Garden, I believe, is the new one.
Yes.
Yeah, great name. There used to be another one, but Terry retired and so he's moved away, yeah.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We're going to have a presentator from Manzanillo that has the tour place of his casa that has got phenomenal amount of flowers, every plant going in Mexico coming up. And you know,
Tommy?
Yes.
Tommy's a very good friend of mine.
Well, there we are. Everybody becomes a friend of everybody when you're down here after a while. Another question. Anybody else have any questions? Anything at all?
Again, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to hear a little bit about your tours and your tour group, just so maybe not all of us know.
Okay, so my company is Flip Flop Nomads, Flip Flop Nomad Tours. So we're located up here on Benito Juarez, just next to the water purifying place. And we do guided tours all over the country. So some of our main destinations, Copper Canyon, Oaxaca. We're doing a train, the Maya train tour starts this week, our first one. Mexico City, Guadalajara, Tequila, Monarch Butterflies, thank you very much, Liz. And they're all guided by local certified experts. We have first class travel to and from. And we're trying to give you, we can never give you a full everything that's in a given area. It's a snapshot of some of our favorite, some of the most emblematic, or some of the best places to visit in a given area. And in certain cases, it serves as a good, grounding area so that you can check it out and then go back. For example, the Guanajuato and Oaxaca areas, people will come along, take the tour, and it gives them an idea, and then they'll go back for 2 months of immersion the next year, whatever, some things like that. We do travel services, and even if I don't have a tour going, always happy to help out, giving you suggestions, giving you ideas, giving you hookups to guides, hotels, anything you want in a given area. If I don't know, I'll speak to a guide or someone who does know, and I'll do my best to find you an answer and make happen what you want to happen.
What are you selling in your store?
Say again, sorry?
What are you selling at the store?
In the store, apart from tours, I'm selling coffee, honey, mojote, and jamaica when I have any from the Indigenous Women's Co-op in Cusalapa. I have some 200-300-year-old recipe, not old liquor, but it's a recipe that's being recovered from the distillation of the palm trees in Colima. It's a coffee liqueur. And I also carry a small line of the Carolinas, the women's sewing project things. So anything that people want to come in and buy of theirs, and we put it in an envelope, and it goes to them. We also take donations for reading glasses, which we then go out into the smaller communities and give those out when we have time. And anything that anyone thinks I could find a use for, I'll find someone to give it, or I'll point you where someone will need that they can't use it.
And your day trips.
Oh, day trips. Okay, I have a day trip to the Kuzulapa Coffee Plantation. We have one to Tommy with his botanical gardens, which is fantastic. He's a very good friend of mine. And
Who's
his,
going to be here coming up next month?
you're going to love Tommy. He's a great talker. So yeah.
Yeah, almost similar, very similar.
Tommy's got whole, he's a retired army colonel, lieutenant colonel. He's got lots more stories than I do. Orchids, the orchid farm in Manzanillo as well as there at the ranch, which is visiting a traditional cattle ranch in La Huerta and seeing how they do that kind of thing as well.
Anybody else have any questions? Any more questions? Do them now. Hand up. Okay, Al, you want to?
I just want to thank you very much for being here
Thank you.
and thank all of you for coming. And we're just so thankful Ken and Marg are setting all this stuff up this year and they're doing an awesome job. So thank you for coming.